What if I told you that your desperate search for happiness is the very thing keeping you miserable? That every swipe, every purchase, every moment of instant gratification is not freeing you, but forging the chains of your own psychological prison? You feel it, don't you? That hollow ache beneath the surface of your busy life. The way pleasure promised to fill the void, but only made it deeper. Today, we journey together through the labyrinth of modern desire, guided by the profound wisdom of Aldous Huxley, Carl Jung, and the uncomfortable truths that society desperately wants you to ignore. If this resonates with your soul, please like this video and subscribe, because by the end of this journey, you'll become a different person. So stay until the end. Your liberation depends on it. You wake each morning with a hunger that food cannot satisfy. It gnaws at you through your coffee, whispers to you during your commute, and screams at you in the silence of your bedroom. This is not mere appetite. This is the modern condition, the disease of perpetual wanting that Aldous Huxley warned us about in his prophetic vision of Brave New World. But Huxley's dystopia wasn't just fiction. Look around you. We live in a world where pleasure has become our opiate, where every discomfort must be immediately soothed, every boredom instantly entertained. You reach for your phone not because you need information, but because you cannot bear to be alone with yourself. The notification becomes your soma, the endless scroll your escape from the frightening depths of your own consciousness. Jung understood this profound truth. Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. But we have become a civilization of sleepwalkers, dreaming that the next purchase, the next pleasure, the next distraction will finally bring us peace. Consider your day yesterday. How many moments did you spend in genuine stillness? How often did you sit with an uncomfortable emotion without immediately reaching for something, anything, to make it go away? The modern soul has forgotten how to be with itself, and in this forgetting, we have become slaves to every passing desire. The pain runs deeper than you might realize. Beneath your successful facade, beneath your social media presence, beneath the carefully curated life you present to the world, there lives a part of you that feels profoundly empty. This emptiness isn't a flaw in your character. It's a symptom of a diseased culture that has taught you to mistake pleasure for happiness, stimulation for aliveness, consumption for fulfillment. Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, the one who creates their own values rather than inheriting them from society. But how can you become the creator of your own meaning when you're constantly consuming the meanings others have manufactured for you? Every advertisement, every algorithm, every carefully crafted piece of content is designed to keep you in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, always reaching for the next thing that promises to complete you. The tragedy is not that you want pleasure. The tragedy is that you've forgotten the difference between pleasure and joy, between stimulation and satisfaction, between having and being. You've become a stranger to your own deeper nature, mistaking the frantic movement of your surface thoughts for the profound stillness that lies beneath. This is the first truth you must face. Your pursuit of pleasure is not making you happy, it's making you hollow. Now we must descend deeper into the shadowy mechanisms of how this happened to you. For you were not born with this endless appetite, you were carefully trained into it. Machiavelli understood that true power lies not in force, but in shaping desire itself. And the modern world has become a masterpiece of desire architecture. From the moment you could focus your eyes, you were taught that happiness comes from outside yourself. The bright colors of toys, the sugar rush of treats, the dopamine hit of approval, all carefully calibrated to create a nervous system that craves external stimulation. Your parents, themselves products of this same system, unknowingly passed down this psychological inheritance, the belief that inner emptiness should be filled with outer abundance. But Jung revealed something profound about human psychology. What we resist in ourselves, we project onto the world. The modern obsession with pleasure is actually a desperate flight from pain. Not just physical pain, but the existential pain of truly knowing ourselves. For in the depths of genuine self-knowledge, we must face what Jung called the shadow. Those parts of ourselves we've rejected, suppressed, and hidden away. The pleasure-seeking mechanism is actually a sophisticated defense against this encounter with your own darkness. Every time you feel the stirring of discomfort, anxiety, or that nameless sadness that seems to have no source, your conditioned mind immediately seeks escape. Social media becomes your digital morphine, shopping becomes your emotional anesthesia, entertainment becomes your shield against the profound silence where truth lives. Huxley saw this with crystalline clarity. In Brave New World, the citizens were kept compliant not through force, but through an abundance of pleasures and the absence of any need to think deeply or feel deeply. They were given soma to eliminate suffering, endless entertainment to eliminate boredom, and instant gratification to eliminate the productive tension of delayed satisfaction. Does this sound familiar? You live in a culture that has pathologized discomfort and commodified comfort. Every natural human experience, sadness, loneliness, boredom, anxiety, has been reframed as a problem to be solved rather than a teacher to be honored. The pharmaceutical industry profits from your inability to sit with depression. The entertainment industry profits from your inability to sit with boredom. The consumer culture profits from your inability to sit with enoughness. But here's what they don't want you to understand. Your discomfort is not your enemy. It's your guide. It's pointing you toward the parts of your life that need attention, the relationships that need healing, the dreams that need honoring. When you immediately medicate every uncomfortable feeling with pleasure, you're not solving the problem, you're silencing the messenger. Nietzsche wrote, "He who would learn to fly one day must first learn to stand and walk and run and climb and dance. One cannot fly into flying." But the modern world promises you flight without the foundation, transcendence without the transformation, peace without the process. The algorithm knows you better than you know yourself. It has studied your patterns, your weaknesses, your triggers. It knows exactly when you're most vulnerable to distraction, most hungry for validation, most desperate for escape. And it feeds you just enough pleasure to keep you coming back, but never enough to satisfy the deeper hunger of your soul. This is not conspiracy. This is simply business. Your attention is the most valuable commodity in the modern economy, and maintaining your attention requires keeping you in a state of perpetual wanting. Satisfied people don't scroll. Content people don't consume. Peaceful people don't profit others. And so we arrive at the most radical act in our modern world, withdrawal, not as escape, but as return, not as abandonment of life, but as reclamation of it. For in a culture that demands your constant availability, choosing conscious unavailability becomes a revolutionary act of self-preservation. The mystics of every tradition understood this fundamental truth. Transformation requires separation. The caterpillar must dissolve completely before it can become the butterfly. The seed must be buried in darkness before it can reach toward light. And you, dear soul, must withdraw from the endless noise of modern living before you can hear the quiet voice of your own wisdom. But let us be clear about what this withdrawal means. Jung spoke of individuation, the process by which one becomes who they truly are, rather than who others expect them to be. This cannot happen in the midst of constant stimulation, endless comparison, and perpetual distraction. It requires what he called holding the tension, staying present with discomfort long enough for genuine transformation to occur. The first step is learning to say no, not just to others, but to your own conditioned impulses. When the familiar urge arises to check your phone, to buy something, to distract yourself from whatever you're feeling, pause, breathe, ask yourself, what am I actually trying to avoid right now? This pause is sacred space. In it, you begin to differentiate between your authentic desires and your programmed responses. You start to notice how much of your wanting is actually just nervous system activation seeking discharge. You begin to see how many of your needs are really just habits wearing the mask of necessity. Nietzsche understood that true freedom comes not from having unlimited options, but from the disciplined cultivation of your own will. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. But the modern world offers you infinite hows and no whys, endless means with no meaningful ends. Conscious withdrawal means creating boundaries, not walls, but sacred spaces where your soul can breathe. It means designated times when you're unreachable by the digital world, spaces where you're unavailable for consumption, moments when you belong only to yourself and the deeper mysteries of existence. Start small. 1 hour each morning before you check any device. 1 walk each day without podcast or music, just you and the world as it is. 1 evening each week in complete solitude, not as punishment, but as gift. Watch how your mind rebels against this stillness. Watch how it generates 1,000 urgent reasons why you should be doing something else. This rebellion is not evidence that withdrawal is wrong. It's evidence that it's necessary. In the silence, you'll meet yourself. Not the self you've constructed for social media, not the self that performs for approval, not the self that consumes to feel complete, but the self that exists in the spaces between thoughts. The self that watches without judgment, the self that knows without needing to prove its knowledge. This is uncomfortable work. Your conditioned mind will tell you that you're missing out, falling behind, becoming irrelevant. The culture will whisper that your withdrawal is selfish, that your boundaries are antisocial, that your need for solitude is evidence of dysfunction. But Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. And you cannot discover who you are in the midst of constantly becoming who others want you to be. The paradox of withdrawal is that by stepping back from the world, you actually step forward into yourself. By becoming unavailable to external demands, you become available to internal wisdom. By refusing the constant stimulation of modern life, you create space for the subtle guidance of your deeper nature. This is not about becoming a hermit or rejecting all worldly engagement. This is about learning to engage from a place of centeredness rather than reactivity, from choice rather than compulsion, from presence rather than distraction. When you've learned to be alone with yourself, you can be truly present with others. When you've learned to find peace in stillness, you can maintain that peace in motion. In the crucible of conscious withdrawal, something remarkable begins to happen. Like the alchemists of old, who sought to transform base metals into gold, you begin the sacred process of transforming your own consciousness from lead to light, from reactive to responsive, from slave to sovereign. Jung called this process individuation, the gradual differentiation of your authentic self from the collective unconscious, from the mass mind, from the endless projections of others' expectations. But this is not merely psychological theory. This is the practical magic of reclaiming your own psychic energy. Every moment you spent seeking external validation, you were giving away your power. Every time you allowed another person's opinion to determine your mood, you were surrendering your sovereignty. Every instance of reaching outside yourself for what can only be found within, you were bleeding energy into the void of endless need. But now, in the sanctuary of your own presence, you begin to call this energy back. You start to notice the subtle ways you've been hemorrhaging life force, through worry about others' opinions, through comparison and competition, through the endless scroll of digital distraction, through the compulsive need to fill every silence with stimulation. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power, not power over others, but power over oneself. The power to choose your response rather than being unconsciously reactive. The power to create meaning rather than inheriting it. the power to remain centered in your own values while the world spins chaotically around you. This is the birth of what the mystics call presence, that quality of being fully here, fully awake, fully alive to this moment as it is, without needing it to be different. In presence, you discover something revolutionary. You are already whole. You are already complete. You are already enough. The hunger that drove you to endless pleasure-seeking wasn't actually hunger for more. It was a confused reaching for what you already are. The emptiness you tried to fill with consumption wasn't actually empty. It was space, the fertile void from which all creativity emerges. The restlessness you medicated with stimulation wasn't actually problem. It was life force seeking authentic expression. From this place of self-recognition, your relationship to pleasure transforms completely. You no longer grasp at it desperately because you're no longer desperately empty. You no longer fear its absence because your peace doesn't depend on its presence. You can enjoy pleasure without being enslaved by it, appreciate beauty without needing to possess it, experience joy without clinging to it. This is the freedom Huxley warned was disappearing from our world. The freedom to be authentically yourself rather than a collection of conditioned responses. In Brave New World, the character John quotes Shakespeare, "O brave new world that has such people in it." But his words are ironic, for the people in Huxley's dystopia were no longer truly people. They were products of social conditioning, happy slaves in a golden cage. You are reclaiming your personhood. You are remembering what it means to be human rather than consumer, to be soul rather than server, to be creator rather than created by others' expectations. This remembering is not a return to some romanticized past, but a movement forward into authentic futurity, becoming who you were always meant to be. In the mirror of your own awareness, you begin to see the world clearly for the first time. You see how much of what you thought was your own thinking was actually inherited from others. You see how many of your desires were implanted rather than authentic. You see how much of your identity was constructed from external materials rather than arising from your own depths. But with this seeing comes great compassion for yourself and for others, still caught in the web of unconscious seeking. You understand now that their aggression comes from pain, their judgment comes from fear, their endless wanting comes from the same emptiness you once tried to fill with pleasure. They are not your enemies. They are fellow travelers who haven't yet learned to come home to themselves. The energy you once spent in reactive patterns, defending, attacking, proving, competing, now becomes available for creative expression. The attention you once scattered across 1,000 distractions now concentrates into focused power. The love you once sought from others now flows naturally from your own recognition of your inherent worth. This is rebirth. Not dramatic transformation overnight, but the gradual emergence of who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning. Like a sculpture hidden within marble, your true nature emerges not through adding something new, but through removing what was never yours to begin with. And now we pause at the threshold of integration, in that sacred space where understanding meets embodiment, where insight transforms into lived wisdom. For knowledge without application remains mere entertainment, and transformation without integration becomes just another temporary high. The question that faces you now is not "do I understand?" but "will I live this understanding?" For there is a vast difference between having a spiritual experience and living a spiritual life, between moments of clarity and a lifetime of conscious choice, between peak experiences and integrated wisdom. Jung warned us about this very trap. He observed that many people become collectors of insights rather than practitioners of wisdom. They gather beautiful concepts like decorative objects, but never allow these truths to fundamentally alter how they move through the world. They remain tourists in the landscape of transformation rather than permanent residents. The integration of this understanding requires what mystics call the long patience. The willingness to practice presence not just when you feel like it, not just when it's convenient, not just when you're on retreat or in meditation, but in the midst of ordinary life, mundane responsibilities, difficult relationships, and challenging circumstances. This is where your real work begins. It's one thing to recognize the prison of pleasure-seeking while sitting in quiet reflection. It's quite another to maintain that awareness when your nervous system is activated, when old patterns are triggered, when the familiar gravitational pull of distraction tugs at your attention. But consider this, every moment of unconscious pleasure-seeking in your past was also a moment of practice. Practice at being unconscious, practice at being reactive, practice at being enslaved by impulse. You have decades of training in unconsciousness. The question is, are you willing to begin training in consciousness with the same dedication? Machiavelli understood that lasting change requires not just insight, but strategy. Not just understanding, but practical application. Not just inspiration, but systems and structures that support new ways of being. The prince who wishes to maintain power must understand both the ideal and the practical, both the vision and the implementation. What systems will you create to support your awakening? What boundaries will protect your newfound sovereignty? What practices will keep you connected to the deeper source of satisfaction that doesn't depend on external circumstances? What reminders will call you back to presence when you inevitably get pulled back into unconscious patterns? For you will get pulled back. This is not failure. This is the nature of transformation. Jung called it the transcendent function, the ongoing process of integrating opposites, of holding tension between where you've been and where you're going, of maintaining awareness while navigating the complexities of human existence. The beauty of this work is that every return to presence is a victory, regardless of how many times you've wandered away. Every moment of conscious choice strengthens your capacity for future conscious choices. Every time you pause before automatically reaching for pleasure to avoid discomfort, you're rewiring decades of conditioning. Every instant of genuine stillness creates space for authentic wisdom to emerge. But let us be honest about what this path requires. You will be misunderstood by those still caught in unconscious seeking. Your new boundaries will frustrate those who benefited from your previous availability. Your reduced consumption will confuse a culture built on endless growth. Your contentment will be incomprehensible to those still pursuing happiness through acquisition. This is the loneliness of awakening, not the bitter loneliness of isolation, but the sweet loneliness of authentic selfhood. For in becoming truly yourself, you necessarily become different from the collective trance, different from mass consciousness, different from the sleepwalking majority. Yet in this apparent separation, you discover a deeper connection. Connection to the source of your own being, to the creative force that moves through all life, to the intelligence that orchestrates the dance of existence. You realize that your individual awakening is not separate from the collective awakening, that your personal liberation contributes to the liberation of all beings. Huxley's final vision, in Island, was not of dystopia but of possibility. A culture built on wisdom rather than stimulation, on genuine satisfaction rather than endless appetite, on conscious living rather than unconscious consumption. Such a world begins with individuals like you who are willing to do the sacred work of remembering who they really are. The mirror of awakened living reflects back to you not perfection, but authenticity. Not the elimination of all pleasure, but the freedom to choose pleasure consciously rather than being chosen by it. Not the absence of desire, but the transformation of desire from desperate grasping into natural flow.